Jenna, I was like you. The Harden part of this shocked me. We've seen this movie before. And the fact that Kevin Durant wants to sign up for it again, well, it just left me flabbergasted. It'd be like if Bradley Cooper went to his agent and said, you know what? Let's run The Hangover back again. Let's do it again. I know it was good, and then it got bad. I want to give it one more time. Let's go to a new location. Doesn't make any sense. They gave this a shot. He played 52 games together. Sure. Fine. And then what happened? Harden quit. It wasn't like, you know what, I want to leave. Like, no, I'm just going to straight up quit on your team, KD. I want out. To the point where when KD had a chance to draft James Harden for the All-Star game, he didn't even want to play with him then. So if he didn't want to play with, Harden didn't want to play with him in Brooklyn. KD doesn't want to play with him in the All-Star game, and now they want to reunite, and people were in my mentions saying, no, Kevin, they're friends. They went to the Travis Scott concert together. Like,
it went to the concert
I
together.
guess, but going to Astro World is very different than going to the city of brotherly love. So I'm shocked by it for a number of reasons, but we'll start with the number one reason being that he's going to want to reunite and join with James Harden again, Nick.
All right, we'll talk about the viability of this in a moment. But first, let's talk about what Wildes is discussing here, which is why would he want to join James Harden when Harden aggressively quit on the Nets? Well, given Kevin Durant's current stance on the Nets franchise, he might say, you know what, James? Turns out you were right, buddy. You know what? At the time, I judged you, but now I'm right there with you. Like, you know what? That James, you were a thought leader on the future of this franchise. So that's the way he could get over that. The second thing is, when it comes to the draft, the All-Star draft, I do think Durant was trying to go for the funniest possible result. I think Durant and LeBron played that perfectly without even talking to each other about it beforehand. So I'm not certain that was about bitterness as much as I have come to decide, I think Durant's one of our funniest great athletes ever. I think he is what he was doing there, it's a bad take.
Mistake.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, all right.
He's
make
not
a
the
list.
funniest
You know
person
what I mean?
on his own team. Sure. Blake Griffin's funnier and Embiid's funnier. So those are the one person on his team and one person.
Okay, well, Embiid's not on his team. All right, you know what? That's a solid list. I don't know that I agree with you on Embiid. Blake Griffin, very good at the comedy cellar, but I also said great athletes. I don't know if Blake Griffin qualifies. Neither here nor there. We can argue about the comedic chops of the other great. Okay, we're going to get derailed here.
Guy jumped over a
I think
keel.
Durant was leaning into. I think Durant was leaning into the bit in that moment. What I do think we all need to recognize and understand, Wildes, is when it comes to the motivations and the inner thoughts of Kevin Durant, despite him being the most accessible athlete on Twitter, none of us know what drives him. None of us know who his real friends are. How many guys have you heard, they're great friends, but I never ever see, Durant doesn't seem to go out to the clubs. If he does a great job of having everyone confiscate phones. I don't know what he does in his daily life that he doesn't show us, and I don't know who his true great friends are. It does not surprise me that Durant would look at the Sixers and say, Embiid's pretty great. I know on the court Harden and I work. Yeah, it doesn't surprise me at all that he would look at that from a basketball perspective and say, yeah, we could go win a title. And by the way, no one would be able to accuse me of joining a ready-made champion since this team has made the conference finals one time since Dr. J was on the team. The conference finals one time since Dr. J was on the team. So I understand why it checks those boxes for him.
Okay, so quickly on the championship-ready 76ers. Mm-hmm. Among the teams that KD has been rumored to go to, and I don't subscribe too much to the bus driver, bus rider thing, but I'll kick it around.
Sure.
If he went to the Celtics, I think he becomes the guy, and I think Tatum takes a back seat.
Yeah.
I just think that way. I think that's his identity. It would be Celtics and Durant. I think usage rate would follow. Same with if he went to New Orleans. I think Zion, young, would still learn, and it would be Durant's team.
No doubt.
If he goes to the Sixers, not only is it the style of play that runs through Embiid, it's also the whole identity of the franchise for a decade, where it's just trust the process. Like, now trust the process is just down to Embiid. He is the process. And he's a guy that wants MVP, who rings the bell, who really embodies Philadelphia. So even if I'm Embiid and Kevin Durant comes, I'm thinking, I don't know. It feels a little super teamish to me. Like, if I'm Embiid, I want to win a championship, but I want to be the guy. Like, I want to be Finals MVP. The idea that it could be a Steph Curry situation, I think it would sit a little bit funny with Embiid.
Well, I don't know. I mean, Embiid hasn't been as far in the playoffs as Trae Young has. So I think Embiid, I understand he wants to win Finals MVP, but they have been far away for the entirety of his career, no matter how good we think they should be or should have been. I look at it more as a LeBron to Miami situation in this regard, Wildes. That was D-Wade's city. That was D-Wade's team. But that was LeBron was the driving force. And so, Wade County, the whole nine, nobody doubted. D-Wade was the most beloved member of that team. He was the guy that had been there all along, but it became LeBron's team. Now, if some would argue, but that's because LeBron was better than D-Wade and Durant's not better than Embiid at this point, I would listen to that argument, except if I'm being totally transparent, and I think most people agree, come the playoffs, you'd rather have Kevin Durant than Joel Embiid. Obviously, you'd want to have them both. That's what the Sixers would be going for here. But in the playoffs, Durant's more of a sure thing than Embiid. But I'm glad we've spent 7 minutes talking about this, because I think later in the show we're going to talk about Kevin Durant going to the Harlem Globetrotters, because it's impossible. And this is my real take here, Wild. So can Kleiman send KD a text to the trade machine so he understands, buddy, there are certain teams you might want to go to, you can't. You know what Philly doesn't have? Draft picks. You know why? Because they traded them for James Harden. It is the single best trade Philly can make is Tobias Harris, Tyrese Maxey, Matisse Thybulle, and second-round picks. They do not have a single first-round pick that they are allowed to trade. They can give them pick swaps, but they've already no. It's not happening. You would just be swapping back because they already did some pick swaps with Brooklyn and the Harden thing. It's an impossible trade. And this is what I want to drill down on for a moment, Wildes. Take the 15 projected best teams in basketball. Half of them we can just scratch off the list if Brooklyn wants picks back. Atlanta, Chicago, Denver, the Clippers, the Lakers, Milwaukee, and Philly. They are all out because I know this will shock Rob Pelinka and Jeannie Buss, but teams that are trying to win championships trade first-round picks down the road. Denver doesn't have any because they traded them for Aaron Gordon. A lot of these teams don't have picks. So who does that leave? Leaves Dallas, Golden State, Memphis, New Orleans, Miami, Phoenix, Toronto, and Boston. But we can scratch some of those off the list. Dallas does not have the player to trade. But is there anyone on Dallas that can be the centerpiece of a Kevin Durant trade other than Luka? Of course not. Miami, we've talked about the Bam issues. I think that can cross them off the list. And because of the DeAndre Ayton just signing, Phoenix gets crossed off the list. Now we're down to 5. 5 is Golden State, Memphis, New Orleans, Toronto, and Boston. And what you're going to see is, okay, Golden State, doesn't it feel like they've kind of removed themselves from the Kevin Durant sweepstakes? Yes. It does to me. Memphis would make sense if Jaren Jackson Jr. didn't just have knee surgery, and if you're super high on him, but he did and they're not, so you can cross them off the list. And then there's Toronto, which everyone keeps bringing up. And the issue with Toronto is if Kevin Durant gets traded to the Raptors for Scotty Barnes and Siakam, or Scotty Barnes and Fred VanVleet, it instantly becomes the worst team Durant's been on since he was on the Seattle Supersonics. Toronto seems great, but not once you have to remove those teams, which leaves you 2 teams, New Orleans and Boston. There are only 2 teams in the league, Wildes, that have the assets to trade for Durant and once trading those assets would still be a contender. There is, to me, not a scenario that exists if you're actually going to put pen to paper and do the trades where any team can come up with a trade that Durant's okay with, that the Nets are okay with, that the team is okay with, other than New Orleans and Boston, which is why Boston and Brooklyn have been circling around each other. That's where he's going to end up unless they listen to me and send New Orleans like they should. But it's two teams. There's 2 out of 30 teams that can make this work.
So now that the pressure to move Durant has been ratcheted up with his ultimatum, why don't you think this has happened yet? Why hasn't Brad Stevens said, all right, the time to strike is now? Or David Griffin said, you know what? I know what our old offer was. We want to get this done now. Let's just rip this Band-Aid off. Let's start flirting. Let's actually make this happen. Yep. Why don't you think they've aggressively made a move?
So I think on the New Orleans thing, I think it's about courting Durant however they can. I think New Orleans will make the most aggressive move possible if and when they get word Durant would be okay with that trade. I don't think they're going to make that trade for an unhappy, I don't want to be here Kevin Durant, who then is going to ask out of there potentially. So I think that's less about what the trade would be between front offices and more about, can we get Kevin Durant and Willie Green in a room together, and can Willie sell Kevin Durant that we can win a title? When it comes to why the Boston trade hasn't happened, it's because both sides are negotiating like, I almost cursed, like jerks. Like, we're going to talk about it later. Sean Marks saying my opening salvo is Tatum and Brown. That makes me not call you.
That's almost like a reason.
That's like, okay, you're being unserious. Stop it. And the Celtics response being like, I guess we'll give you Jaylen Brown and maybe we'll throw in Peyton Pritchard in 1 pick. Well, that's not enough either. And so I think the two, they were both on such far extremes, and there is no ticking clock that I think, but it's going to be one of those two teams. There is not a trade to be made that works except for to New Orleans or to Boston. And Kevin Durant's going to be playing for one of those two teams this year. The Philly thing would be fun. They'd be overwhelming favorites, but I don't think they can make the deal.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from First Things First, or go watch a few segments from our other shows on FS1.